We are in this bizarre situation where we are constantly debating whether or not one of our major political parties is led by people who support anti-Semites. After Jeremy Corbyn was forced to defend joining a far-left group to celebrate Passover, a 4-hour celebration with a group who chanted F to the police and to the armies and to the Queen and have called for the destruction of Israel, etc., etc. A bizarre choice on Monday night at the end of the bank holiday weekend after his own party has been accused of protecting anti-Semitic comments made by some members, and big question marks over whether or not Jeremy Corbyn has himself befriended just rather too many anti-Semitic people and groups over the years for people's comfort. Just how widespread is anti-Semitism within the Labour Party? And is it spread across our political spectrum? And is it across our society? Certainly the defence of the Labour Party, and I've seen it online again and again, is that, well, anti-Semitism is across our society. It's everywhere, and Labour are doing their best to tackle it. Now, some of us won't actually find that easy to believe, but let's talk to two people who might be able to help us with it. Tory MP Shapps, he's the former Conservative Party chair, and Labour MP Louise Ellman, who both join me now. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Good morning.
Grant, if I could start with you first. Now, you're both Jewish, and we'll come from a particular perspective where we are in a time in 2018, which I find extraordinary, that we are debating what is and what isn't anti-Semitism. We are seeing party figures openly on Facebook, on Twitter, and elsewhere denying the Holocaust. People who doing so being defended by what have been senior party figures in the Labour Party, like Christine Shawcroft. And then we see, after all the apologies and after all the hand-wringing by Jeremy Corbyn, him joining a group which itself has accused Jewish Labour MPs and many Jewish Tory MPs who also joined a protest a week ago in Westminster of basically smearing the Labour leader, and the whole thing about anti-Semitism being basically a media conspiracy against Jeremy Corbyn. What do you make of it all?
It's just extraordinary that in the 21st century we're having this conversation. I am Jewish, as it happens. I don't think I've ever, in my time as an MP, spoken about Jewish issues particularly, or Israel or anything else, largely because I've never thought that there was a need to speak out on these issues, because I thought things like anti-Semitism were literally settled decades ago. And to actually be in a situation where we're having to have the conversation at all is, to me, just extraordinary. And I mean, you just summed a lot of it up in your opening there. I've got the order of service that was used the other night. They're called the Haggadah in front of me. And there are passages in here which praise Jeremy Corbyn directly. There's a picture of him that they've put into this order of service as well.
This is for the Jewdas group that he met with.
The Jewdas group, that's right. So he spent 4 hours with them. There's a passage in here which says that I can't even actually say what it says, because it's just got sort of profanities throughout it. And then it goes on as you pointed out, to say F the police, F the army. All cops are illegitimate children, etc. It is just amazing that a mainstream leader of Her Majesty's opposition actually thought that, I mean, in any time, let alone at a time when this has risen up the agenda, and there was that protest last week, and he said we're going to absolutely tackle this, that at any time, but now in particular, that Corbyn would think that this was an acceptable place to spend his time with people with views. I mean, forget the anti-Semitism. I mean, just views about everything else to do with our society. But people can have different views. That's fine. But no decent person in Britain would read this without being extremely concerned. And you can download it and read it.
And Louise Ellman, Jeremy Corbyn's certainly entitled to spend his Monday nights with anyone he darn well chooses. And we're told he did this in a personal capacity, not as leader of the opposition. I'm not sure such a thing really exists. I think you're leader of the opposition 24/7. But a lot of people are seeing this decision by Jeremy Corbyn, after all the statements from Momentum and from his office and interviews that he himself gave about how he wants to tackle anti-Semitism within the Labour Labour Party, that for him to go and meet with this particular group, the Jewdas group, they regard themselves as satirical, but have a lot of very strong views. And they themselves had criticised mainstream Jewish organisations representing the Jewish community in this country for attending this march and accused it of a media conspiracy and a smear against Jeremy Corbyn. For him to attend that meeting is being seen as, well, a nod and a wink to the anti-Semites, which is, don't worry, I don't mean it really.
Well, I think it was gross misjudgment. I mean, we're now at a very critical point in trying to heal the rift between the British Jewish community and the Labour Party. And Jeremy Corbyn chose to go to an event held by a group that's called people who called out the anti-Semitism that's going on in the Labour Party. And I quote, the work of cynical manipulation by people who've expressed loyalties to the Conservative Party and the right wing of the Labour Party. Now, that shouldn't have been the first call of Jeremy Corbyn if he's trying to solve the problem. I'm glad that subsequently he has now said he does want to meet the Board of Deputies of British Jews and the Jewish Leadership Council, and they are the representative body of a very diverse British community. So I hope he gets on and does that, but it was a gross misjudgment to meet a group who clearly is so separate from most of the.
But that's it. I mean, he's entitled to, the group are entitled to exist and hold their views. He's entitled to meet with them. I've got no issue with that whatsoever. However, in choosing to meet, as you say, with this group, this organisation on this particular day, as you say, is a gross misjudgment. So this is the thing. I mean, politically, it's a misjudgment, but is it morally as well? Because either he just isn't really bothered about anti-Semitism in his party, and he thinks this is all just a smear and it's all made up and it's not an issue, or he thinks that, well, it is an issue, but he's not bothered by it at all, or he's just stupid. Now, on all three grounds, does that make him fit to be Prime Minister?
Well, it certainly is very wrong, gross misjudgment for him to go there. And I struggle to understand quite how his thought processes go. It seems that at 1 minute he's saying there isn't any anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and then he admits that there is. Then he says that he's going to deal with it, including looking at people's unconscious bias. The next minute he's doing something different. I think he's struggling to come to terms with left-wing anti-Semitism. He thinks of anti-Semitism as something on the right, which it is, but he doesn't recognise anti-Semitism on the left. Well, it's about time he did recognise it, and I hope that he now does. And he's actually going to do something about it.
Well, Grant, I mean, some people were tweeting me yesterday saying, well, what about anti-Semitism? What about racism in the Tory party? Is this a problem that goes across the board?
I think society always has to be very alive to these things. But I can say, hand on heart, I have never, ever, not once, experienced any anti-Semitism as a conservative Jewish politician. Most people really didn't realise I was Jewish. I mean, it just has not.
I think for most people, no one's interested in people. That's people's personal religion.
And
unless they choose to mention it, it's irrelevant.
That's always been my view. That I'm a proud Brit who believes in making this country the best it can be, and the rest of it. I don't really care what religion people are. To me, it's sort of irrelevant. And I can tell you that in 12, 13 years of being a Conservative MP, I don't think any colleagues ever mentioned it to me. I've never felt any sense of anti-Semitism at all. And I thought that actually in British politics across the board, it was a dead issue from a different century.
Do you think this is a peculiar, and I wouldn't even say this is a Labour issue, this is a Corbyn issue, because the abuse that I see to many of Louise Ellman's colleagues, and Louise, I don't know if you've received abuse yourself online, appears to be from people who identify themselves, rightly or wrongly, as Corbynistas.
Well, you know what? I've actually resisted commenting on this at all, not least because I'm more than aware that as a former Tory chairman, if I start talking about it, people might just say, oh, well, you're trying to make political capital out of it. I'll tell you the thing, actually, when your programme contacted me yesterday that made me say yes to talking about it, is that for decent MPs, the majority, I think, actually, in the Labour Party, who are speaking out about it, it's important that they are supported from across the board without bringing any politics into it. But there is a problem, and if you are still listening to this and are sceptical that there's a problem, you only need to download what this Jewdas group must have put in front of Jeremy Corbyn for 4 hours the other night. And even putting aside the anti-Semitic side of things, what they're saying about the police, what they're saying about the army, what they're saying about the monarchy. I mean, if you don't have to believe in any of these things, but there are ways, just as decent human beings, to express yourself. And this is at the other end of the scale.
And organisations that it would be appropriate for the leader of the opposition to spend time with. Grant Shapps, thank you. Louise Ellman, I mean, I know a lot of Jewish MPs, including those on the left, have received abuse. Luciana Berger has often tweeted out the abuse. I mean, it's just absolutely vile. Many prominent Jewish commentators. Have you received abuse, and where do you think it's coming from?
I haven't received any abuse recently. I have received abuse in the past, and it's been pretty nasty, and I think it's from a variety of sources. But you did mention at the beginning of this piece that there is anti-Semitism in society generally, and that there is the Community Security Trust, which
I said that Jeremy Corbyn says there is.
Well, there is. I mean, the Community Security Trust, which is the official body working with the police that monitors anti-Semitism and records hate crimes, works with the police in combating them, did announce that there was the highest ever level of anti-Semitism last year, particularly in the last few months. There is a problem, and in the Conservative Party, there has been a problem too. And in the last Parliament, there was an MP who dressed up in Nazi uniform. Nothing was done about him, and it somehow faded away. The current problem that we're all focusing on, quite rightly, is what's going on in the Labour Party, but there are problems elsewhere too, and we shouldn't forget that. But it doesn't take away the problem we're now facing in the Labour Party, and that's what I'm concentrating on.
Louise Ellman, a Labour MP for Liverpool Riverside, and Grant Shapps, Tory MP for Welwyn Hatfield, and former Conservative Party chair. Very much appreciate you both joining us. Thank you very much indeed. Let me bring in my guests who are joining me this morning: Richard Angel, Director of Progress, the centre-left think tank, and Russell Quirk, who's founder and chief executive of the emove.co.uk property website. Richard, I know you're keen to come in on this. You've been speaking out very vociferously as the Director of Progress about the problem. How bad is the problem of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party among Corbyn acolytes and in society and politics at large?
I think it is a real problem. In fact, I think it's a systemic problem, and it's become potentially an institutional problem in the Labour Party. Let's remember why this is being talked about. This is a 2-week story now because the leader of the opposition took 4 attempts to say sorry for something he put on Facebook back in 2012. He sided with the anti-Semitic artists, I say in inverted commas, over the Jewish community who were trying to get this horrid mural deleted because apparently he didn't look at it properly. When it's got a green pyramid behind you, you know to be alarmist that it's normally some kind of... You could not, with half a brain, look at that mural and not know it was anti-Semitic. I mean, I'm exactly.
sorry. And if you don't know it's anti-Semitic, then frankly, you're not fit to be
And what you
Prime
see
Minister.
is statement after statement saying how seriously anti-Semitism is, and then no actions follow. In fact, the only vague action we can see that's come from Jeremy Corbyn is that he called Christine Shawcross and said, I don't think you should chair this committee, but you can still be a member of the Disputes Committee. And it was only because Labour Party members and Labour MPs rose up and said this is not acceptable that she resigned from that committee. What's so sad about the Jewdas thing is that Momentum started to get on board to be part of the solution on this, and Jeremy Corbyn has blown that out the water this week. There is a real problem here, and it's got to be dealt with.
It was the very day, of course, on Monday when Momentum issued a statement saying acknowledging that there was. I mean, it took a while for them to acknowledge there was anti-Semitism. What do you make of it all, Russell? Looking from the outside,
let's put this into perspective. If it were the other way around, if this were a senior Conservative, let's say the Home Secretary, the party chairman, at least not the Prime Minister, that had been caught at, let's say, the Monday Club. So the Monday Club, an extreme-ish right-wing organisation but kind of with Conservative roots. The uproar, I mean, that person would have resigned by now for sure. I think we have to call into question not just Jeremy Corbyn's kind of judgment and his morals, but his mental health. I mean, surely a man that's under such fire. I really do. I really do. This man is under the cosh for anti-Semitism. He goes to something that is being touted as an anti-Semitic organisation. There's a debate over that.
Whether it's anti-Semitic. They are Jewish.
And I'm saying no, but they're anti-Israel rather than anti-Semitic.
That's a very big difference.
Absolutely, yeah. I concede that. However, this man, as Grant Shapps has just said, knows the MO of this organisation and the fact that they are effectively anarchistic. They are an anarchistic organisation, and still chooses to go and spend 4 hours there. I think he's sticking his fingers up at the Labour Party
and that's certainly
and the
what
membership
Campaign Against
and
Anti-Semitism said.
That's different.
I think he failed to be deposed several times in 2006, 2017. I think he's got a superiority complex. I think he's sticking his fingers up.
I have a funny feeling that Jeremy Corbyn is believing his own publicity these days, and that to me is one of the issues. To me, I liken it as, say, Theresa May's done this interview about the gender pay gap, saying how awful this is and sexism and the like, and then going to a President's Club dinner Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's the equivalent, isn't it? It's just it's the mixed messaging is very interesting.